Hi, Nicole. Welcome to my channel. Would you mind introducing yourself to people?
Hi, Sabrina. It is fantastic and so lovely to be here with you today. My name is Nicole Kaale and I am a registered mental health nurse.
How long have you been a nurse for?
Oh, that I've got to calculate now. So I did my training, goodness, it was in 2008. I
Okay.
finished in 2011. So it's about 14 years. About 14 years of being a registered nurse now. Yeah. It
Geez, the
feels like
time goes
yesterday.
really quickly. I know it does,
The time
doesn't
does
it?
go quick. Yes, it does.
Cool. And what inspired you to get into nursing?
So it actually came from college, and I
Mhm.
remember, so we're going back now 2006, and I remember I was studying psychology. That was one of the A levels that I took, and I really wanted to be a psychologist. I never
Mhm.
actually wanted to be a nurse. And at the time, fortunately, I had a college tutor so she was my A level teacher in psychology, and she was an ex mental health nurse. And I had a particular interest in psychiatric conditions. I mean, that was the main thing that I was fascinated by. And I also had
Mhm.
family members who had severe mental illness, and I was always very interested in, how do people get these different types of conditions? How do you treat
Yeah.
people? How do you help them? What can we do about it? And so I'd say that my passion or my interest for mental health nursing, which at that time I didn't even know was a thing, was really born out of that discussion with my college tutor. And she said to me, one day she sat me down and said to me, you know what, I can see that you have a real interest in this area. Rather than doing psychology, why don't you think about mental health nursing? And I remember thinking, mental
Wow.
health nursing, I can actually be like a nurse in mental health from day one.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the rest is history, really. So I went to university straight after college. So I was one of the
Mhm.
youngest students in my
Mhm.
cohort. I was only 18 when I started nursing. Of course, finished by 21. And
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't looked back. I haven't looked back.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like, walk me through your journey. So when you would have qualified, you would have qualified with, let me check, a degree in nursing. Was
So
the
I actually
nursing a degree
started,
course yet?
yes. So I
Oh,
actually started with a diploma. And
okay.
there is a bit of a backstory to this, and
Yeah.
I actually found the transition from secondary school to college very, very difficult. And I
Yeah.
had lots of different challenges and things that were changing in my personal life at that time at home. And so I feel that that had a really big impact on my studies, my ability to learn, my concentration. And so I
Mhm.
didn't get the grades that I really wanted to, what I needed to get into university to do the degree straight away. So I actually got an unconditional offer to do a diploma
Okay.
of higher education with registration. The good thing in that situation is that I got into my first choice university, which was King's
Mhm.
College.
Oh,
So I was
grand.
really grateful for that. So I started
Yeah.
with the diploma and I later did my nursing degree. So I self-funded and did that after. So that's
Wow.
that's
Wow.
sort of how
That's
it landed.
that's cool because I trained in 2001, so did the diploma. You could have done the degree, but I did the diploma, and my
Yeah,
first job was rotation, and it topped up
yeah,
to a degree. But
yeah.
it's interesting, isn't it? The pathways now, because I don't think they do the diploma now, but it's
No,
great for
I don't think they
you.
do.
Yeah.
So many people would say to me as a student nurse going onto the wards, you're very young, love. You're very
Yeah.
young. I mean, I remember people saying to me, the patients may not speak to you, they may not open up to you in the same way because you're very young.
Yeah.
And I mean, my experience was the complete opposite, and I've had a fantastic journey and career
Hmm.
in mental health nursing. But at the same time, now that I'm in my 30s, closer to 40 now, I'm like, wow, I was really very young to go into nursing at that age.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm so glad that I did. And as
Yeah.
you said earlier, I couldn't have imagined myself in any other, even now, any other type of nursing apart from mental health.
I know, right? I know. And just on the part about being young, because when I qualified, I was about 22 and went to CAMS. And I remember at that time being a children and adolescent mental health nurse, that's what CAMS mean,
Yeah.
is having conversation with parents about supporting their young person I don't even have kids, Nicole. Like, I was thinking, what is going on
Yeah.
here? But I guess one of the most trusted professions being a nurse, isn't it?
Absolutely,
No matter
yes.
the age, it's very trusted. So,
Yes, yes, it is. And it's really funny you say that, because I had a conversation with my accountant a couple of weeks ago, and he
yeah.
said to me, he does like a little joke, and he said to me, "Do you know what the most trusted profession is?" I said, "Let me guess. Is it nurses?" And he said, "Oh, you are such a bright girl. How did you know it was nurses?" So you're absolutely right. It is worldwide the number
Mhm.
one most trusted profession. Yeah, so I'm very, very proud to be a nurse.
Walk me through your career then.
Qualified at 21, and my background is in forensic nursing. So I started on a medium secure all male unit. And again, at the time, I sort of fell into working in forensics, because I remember at that time, the trust that I worked for, they were doing a rotation. They were
Mhm.
doing a rotation, but also they were doing a mass recruitment for new nurses. And so I went on to the mass recruitment, which meant that you went to a group selection. So you did various things like tests, written
Yeah.
tests, and drug calculations, that type of thing. And then you had to put down what your first and second choice was for workplaces. And I think because I was just so, I was anxious, I was a new nurse, I was on edge, and I was just
Mhm.
racing through all the things I needed to get done on time. And I selected a medium secure unit, not knowing that I'd selected a medium secure unit. And so I tried to change it and get them to put me on for my second choice, which was actually my first choice, and that was a intensive care unit.
Yeah.
But they said to me, "No, you're not going to be able to change. We've got to put you forward for your first choice, which is the forensic unit." And so I decided to go for it, did the interview and got the job. And
Mhm.
as you know, when you're a newly qualified nurse, the first thing you're thinking about is, right, I've got to get my first job. And
Yeah.
so I went on, did the interview and got the job, as I say, and started there and absolutely loved it. I was there for probably about 3 years.
Mhm.
So I started as a band five nurse there. I then had the opportunity to move up into a deputy ward manager's position. So by 23, I was a deputy ward manager, otherwise known as a charge nurse. And again, that was a tough process, because there were a
Mhm.
few people that were going for that position. And, being the youngest nurse on the ward, probably the least experienced, there were definitely people who were sort of thinking, well, I don't know if she's got it in her to do this
Mhm.
job. And, somebody with more experience should be in a leadership role like that. But I suppose, I always demonstrated my passion for the work, for the patients. I was very dedicated to my job.
Mhm.
And I think I was able to demonstrate that, and so I got the next post up, which was the band six. Then what happened is there was a big restructure in the
Mhm.
organisation, and I think I suppose I was one of those people that was afraid of the change. And so it meant that there were going to be lots of different staffing changes, differences in how we were going to work. And I think, again, it probably comes down to my own maturity at that time in the profession. And
Mhm.
I felt that the change was too big for me to manage, in all honesty. And so that's what led me to community nursing. So I remember when I was a student, I often looked at what we called CPNs, so community psychiatric nurses, and I looked up to them thinking, wow, I want to be a CPN one day. They're amazing. They know everything. They know the patients so well. They go and see people at home, and I'd love to see where these people are actually coming from. Where are the patients
Yeah.
coming from? Their life outside of being in a mental health unit. And so I applied for a few jobs, and I ended up getting a job in a different trust. And so I then became a community psychiatric nurse. And interestingly, I stayed there for a little while.
Mhm.
So I think it was probably around, I want to say it was about 6 years roughly altogether, 5 or 6 years that I was a community psychiatric nurse for. And I had done a couple of different positions. So I worked in like low intensity teams, I
Mhm.
worked in community mental health teams. I also ran clozapine clinics and medication clinics. So I had a good variety of the band six community role. And then it sort of came to a point where I thought, well, actually, I'd had my first child, so that's this is what initially sparked the thought of, right, I need to actually probably move up, because
Mhm.
band six financially was good for me with no children.
Mhm.
But then I thought, my gosh, I wasn't in a position where I had my parents were working, my in-laws were working, so I wasn't in a position where we had childcare readily accessible in that way. And
Yeah.
so, when you start to look at the fees for childcare and the cost of living, I sort of thought, oh, this is not going to work. So I'm going to have to do something else.
Mhm.
Um, so I then saw an opportunity come up for a team manager's position. And it was to manage a team that I'd never worked in the team before, but I used to be a band six in a similar team. So again, this was all around residential care, patients being
Mhm.
supported in high support placements. And so I felt like I had a really good knowledge of that field because I'd looked after patients under that type of team in the past. So I went for it and I got the job. I was so glad I got the job. And that was my first manager's position.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a couple of years. And then I had another period of maternity leave when I had my second child. And again, I think going through the pandemic and being faced with so many different challenges again around change and the way that we were working, needing to manage staff, it was quite a large team. There were lots of different elements to it because it wasn't just working with people in healthcare, but there was also a very large element of social care, just because of the nature of the team. And it sort of led me to think, okay, if I can do this, maybe I can do something on the next level.
Mhm.
And so again, I always thought that I wanted to be a matron. I always thought I'm going to be a matron. I'd seen so many fantastic matrons in the trust that I worked in, and the matron that I had at the time was brilliant. And I aspired to be like them. And I thought, well, I'm into governance, I'm into patient care, I like
Mhm.
quality. I want to do the absolute best, and that's going to be on the matron pathway. Applied for a couple of matron posts. I ended up getting one of the posts, which was in a fantastic specialist area. It was in the perinatal pathway. So I became a matron for a mother and baby unit and 4 community perinatal teams. And so I did that for around a year. Around a year. And then I realized that actually, I don't think matron is for me. And I think it's really difficult to describe why I felt that, but I think I realized that I was a lot more operational than I thought I was. So I
And
was very much,
yeah,
yes, go for it.
so that's a good point because when you say operational, just say a bit more about what it means to be more operational than
Yeah.
the role as a matron.
Really good point. So I think with the matron role, it was very heavily focused on quality. So it's a lot around, to put it in basic terms, you're almost like a mini internal inspector for your own services. So
Mhm.
you're looking at quality, you're looking at patient care, you're looking at the standards, different sets of standards across the patient pathway. And so you're not directly managing anyone. For the particular role that I was doing, I wasn't directly managing anyone. I wasn't necessarily setting up services. I didn't necessarily have to make decisions around
Mhm.
the service delivery as such. I think in terms of the matron role, it's very much about influence because you're not managing anyone. It's very much about your relationships and being able to influence people and bring them along the journey to improve patient care. And of course, to get people on board with what I think the wider sort of trust vision is. And so the work was very much around those sort of relationship building, inspections, internal appraisals, and auditing of my own services, which I did enjoy. But I
Yeah.
felt that I really longed to have more autonomy. And now I will say, I don't think this is necessarily down to the matron role as such, but I think it's just how different services are set up. And so I found that I wanted to have more autonomy and I wanted to be much more in the driving seat,
Mm.
at the forefront of leadership and making a lot more decisions around how services were shaped than I was at the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because again, when I look back in my earlier career, I sort of thought I'd never want to manage several teams. I'd never want to be all about KPIs and what's the next target that we need to meet.
Yeah.
I don't really want to deal too much with patient referrals coming in and out and how quickly are we seeing people, which is all
Mhm.
part of operational management. Especially the people management, being a line manager, and as I say, having multiple teams. I always looked at that role and thought, my gosh, what a stressful job! Oh, God, I'd never want to do that job. And I surprised myself. So then what happened is a job came up. It, funny enough, was also a job. It was a job to be a service manager. So it was a band 8A sideways move. So I was an 8A matron,
Yeah.
and it would have been a sideways move for me. And the job was to manage 3 services that I'd never worked in them before in that area, but I had been a band 6 in all 3 of those areas. So
Mhm.
it included a physical health team, there was a clozapine medication clinic, and also community mental health team, and a low intensity, like a primary care team.
Mhm.
And they were all community based, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, this is my dream job. I've got to get this job." And so I applied for the job, and to my absolute dismay, I applied and the job was taken down. And I remember calling the hiring manager, almost like, "What's going on? Please, I need to have this job." And I called her and I was like, "What's going on?" And she said, "Oh, there's been a little bit of a change in the structure, so we have taken it down for the moment,
Mm.
but it may go back up again. So just keep your eyes peeled." And thank God the job came back out a couple of weeks later. I went for the interview and I really, really prepped like my life
Mhm.
depended on it, because I so wanted this opportunity. And so I got the job. I went to the interview and I feel like, I mean, I don't want to sound, I feel like I was very passionate in that interview and I really knew what I wanted to deliver in the role.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the best ever jobs that I've had, one of the best jobs I've had. And I had a fantastic time there. So I did that job again, probably for just over a year, about a year and a half,
Mhm.
until the next post came up, which was the 8B general manager. And again, I sort of fell into that because I always looked at that role and thought, it's so stressful. I don't know how people do that job. You're managing several, you could be managing between 6 and 12 services. You're now managing
Yeah.
service managers. So everything is going up a level. And I thought, no, I don't think that's the kind of job that would suit me very well, even though I really enjoyed my service manager job. But an opportunity came up, and I decided to go for it for an interim position, and I got that. And I later went for it on a more of a longer term basis, like a fixed term
Yeah.
basis. And again, I got that when it came round to it. Lots of interviewing and preps and things like that. And so that's really summed up my NHS journey. And then
Yeah.
to bring us to present day, so just to go back a couple of months, so July,
Yeah.
there was, I suppose, I came to a personal realization, and it mostly revolved around my children. So my kids are
Mhm.
5 and 9, and I was in a situation where I was working 9 to 5, was having to drop the kids off, sorry, pick them
Mm.
up. And there was lots of juggling that was going on. And what I was hearing on a regular basis from my kids is that they just weren't happy with that arrangement. And the thing
Yeah.
about kids is they
They're
they
very
they don't hold
honest.
back when it comes to telling the
No.
truth and how they
Yeah.
feel. And I would literally be dropping them and racing in the morning to work, really race, hoping that meetings at 4:30 would finish on time at 5, because I lived 45 minutes in no traffic from where I was working. So
Mm.
sometimes it could take me an hour and I'd need to get back by 6 o'clock because the after school club would be closing at 6:15. And so it was a very intense juggling act, which I think actually became more intense when my kids went to school, because
Mhm.
when they were at nursery, or when I had one child at nursery, and a bit more support, it was very different. The hours were
Yeah.
much longer. I was working nearer to home. And so my kids being unhappy with the arrangement and wanting to come home after school, not necessarily go somewhere else every day after
Mhm.
school. And also me wanting to pursue other things in life with more clarity, focus, and more time, aka business.
Yeah.
I came into an opportunity to work in ADHD.
Mhm.
And so initially I thought, okay, when I was in the NHS, I thought about it and I'd heard about, lots of different services starting. And I thought, okay, this might be an opportunity to sort of dip my toe in and see.
Mhm.
And one day I just got up and I just had a realization, and I just thought, I can't continue this anymore. I just can't keep racing to a 9 to 5, getting
Yeah.
home after 6. I was getting in and I was just thinking, I feel tired. I can't think about doing homework and reading
Mhm.
and then cooking and sorting the kids out. And I just thought, my husband was also working long hours, and it was very difficult to try and juggle both of us working full time, long hours, and managing the children. And I just thought, no, I can't do this anymore. So I decided to take up an opportunity that I had to work with a company, a private company in ADHD.
Mhm.
And it was really good because I had connections from previous jobs in the NHS, and I think it's testament to having good relationships.
Yeah.
And so that supported me having that opportunity and having a good relationship with people that were in that offering this service allowed me to make the transition out of the NHS.
Mhm.
And now I mean, I work much less hours now. I work 10 till 2. I can take my kids to
Wow.
school every
Yeah.
day. I can pick them up. We do all sorts of activities every day after school, and it's amazing. I'm now
Yeah.
able to put a lot more time and focus into my business. That's also grown, and I feel like I'm starting to live a life that I always dreamt about. I'm now
Yeah.
like, wow, okay, I can actually at 2 o'clock in the afternoon go and sit in the coffee shop.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So that has been my journey so far.
No, and it is amazing and testament because there's lots of stuff that you sort of said there that I think just taking opportunities when they come, not letting your age or your
Yes.
experience being a barrier to going for things. And I think there's something you said as well. It wasn't that you were being cocky and going for stuff. You thought, I
Mhm.
could do this. Yeah,
Yes.
there are other people with more experience, but I could do it as well, and
Yeah.
putting yourself in those spaces to do it. And I so
Yes.
identify with the bit around wanting to be a matron, because I've said this on
Yes.
many other places. In my head, I was going to be a chief nurse. So I was going down the
Yeah.
quality route until I
Yes.
did a head of nursing role. And I thought, yeah, this
Yes.
influencing thing is great, but I want things done. And to
Yes.
do that, you have
Absolutely.
to be in the ops
Yes.
end of it.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you think this, but I think having experience as a in a quality role, like a matron or head of nursing, makes me a better ops manager, or made
Yes.
you a better ops
Absolutely.
manager. Yeah,
Absolutely. I agree. I agree completely. And I think it it also allows me to have a fantastic working relationship with the matrons that I ended up
exactly.
working with
Yeah,
when I was a service manager and a general manager. I mean, we were like inseparable. I was
yes,
inseparable from the matrons, and I do think that the eye that you have for things is very different when you've done both roles. And I do think
yeah,
that that sort of double edged perspective is just invaluable in any role, really. So I do agree that I think if anyone has done that or is thinking of doing switching between roles or pathways, whether you're in quality and you want to do ops, or whether you're in ops and you want to do
yeah.
quality, I think you're onto a winner. If you can do both, then that's amazing. But now
No,
I know I am ops through
yeah.
and through. I am ops.
I still flip flop between the two, but I do like where I am at the moment. But you're right, I work really closely
Yeah.
with my director of nursing, and we always
Yeah.
sort of thinking similar things, So
Yes.
that's
Absolutely.
really
Yeah.
great. The other bit that you mentioned, which I don't think people realise a lot as well, is you did really good work, but the relationships that you had with people opened up
Yes.
opportunities that
Yes.
you and there's something about you're not building relationships with people because you think something's going to happen, but
Yes.
the people you work with, you make sure you have good working relationships, you do the work,
Yes.
so people know if they ask Nicole to do X, or if they want something to be done, Nicole's my person. you
Yes,
and
absolutely. Yeah.
go on.
No, that's so true.
Yeah.
And as you said that, I thought about this saying that a lady once said to me, and it was that the day that you reap the harvest is not the day that you sow the seeds.
Yes.
And so, exactly what you're describing, I feel like all the relationships I've made over the last however many years, 14 years in the NHS, it's almost like sowing a seed. So, whether that's of value, contribution, supporting,
Hmm.
mentoring, coaching, learning, being a student myself to these people, um, it's a seed that's been sown with a person, and you never know what harvest can come from that. And so, I do completely agree with exactly what you said, and I think I'm so grateful for the relationships that I was able to have with
Yeah.
different people, at a time in the past when I never knew in the future what that relationship would mean. What opportunities would come via different people, that have happened now. I never, these opportunities did not exist when I first met those people.
No, exactly,
you know, they
exactly,
didn't
exactly.
exist. So I'm so grateful that positive seeds were sown back then that have contributed now to, honestly, I feel, to me, living my best life, honestly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for that.
Cool. And I want to go into a bit of, and I think you've had, I've known you in part of your career, and I think, you've been an amazing nurse and colleague. But the bit that I'm really interested in, I wonder if people listening would have picked up about, is that whole bit of the 9 to 5, great, band 5, band 6, band 7, great, but sometimes the money doesn't stretch to cover everything
Yes,
that you
yes,
need it to do. Obviously, having 2 kids and having to, most people don't work close to where they live. I don't.
yeah.
So I can imagine that challenge of going in, trying to be a mom and being a good manager, and then thinking, actually, what is my purpose here? But being
Yes,
able to pivot. So you said
yes,
your kids
absolutely.
being that mirror,
Yes,
that honesty mirror
yes,
that said they want a
yes.
bit more of mom, that
Hmm.
opportunity that had, but also you've spoken about having other opportunities in business. I wonder,
Hmm.
how do you see the skills you have as a nurse helping you
Hmm.
to pivot into these other opportunities?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because I think what I've always been into business of some
Hmm.
kind. I
Yes.
started off many years ago doing hair. Everybody that's known me for over 20 years knows that Nicole was the hairdresser. I was doing
Yeah.
everybody's hair, had salon jobs and all the rest of it. And I think a lot of people will liken a hairdresser to like a therapist,
Yeah.
someone who you can talk to, who you can trust, who you can have coaching or mentoring with, who could put you on the right track. And those are a lot of the skills that nurses also have. And
Hmm.
so I think, as we said earlier, nursing is the most trusted profession. And I think where I've been able to mentor and coach people for nursing, I'm now able to mentor and coach people in terms of building wealth, building
Hmm.
income, um, having more time for themselves, being able to have, not only freedom, as I say, when it comes to money, time, opportunities, but having opportunities for personal development outside of nursing. And so I think those skills are always transferable because it's about communication. It's about
Yeah.
showing people value. It's about, in the same way that I would help a patient and put them first, is what I do when I'm working with people in business. It's about, how can I help you? How do I show this person? And in fact, I'm working with lots of nurses in business now. And so I've been able to show a lot of them how to earn around their nine to
Yeah.
five, how to have the option of earning money from home online that doesn't require them to go and pick up, a 10, 12 hour night shift. I don't even know how many hours. It's been so long I've done nights. I don't know how
It's
many hours
about
it is now.
14 hours these days.
14-hour
It's
night
eight,
shift, you
eight to
know,
eight with an hour break. And yeah, God.
this is it. So now I'm able to show nurses how they can earn money without doing that.
Mm,
So I think it feels like such a privilege, but as I say, I think it really goes back to communication, showing value, but thinking about how you can help other people first. That's how I've been able to use those skills in business.
great. And because again, I think it's really what you spoke about, obviously going into the private sector, because at the moment there is lots going on NHS wise. I think
Yeah.
anybody that's got to an 8B position or even lower, some of the places in my head where people might be thinking of wanting to pivot to, such as NHS England, ICB, etc., feels like
Yeah.
in a massive state of flux. And the other bit is private sector. Not everybody's
Yeah.
sure, because I was
Yes.
listening something where golden handcuffs it was, because one of the great
Yes.
things about the NHS is your job's sure. One,
Absolutely.
if you're paying into the pension like I have, you start thinking,
Yes.
ooh, if I go, what's going to happen with that?
Yes. Yes.
So again, what sort of things did you use to make that decision to
Yes.
move?
Yes. I love that question. Do you know what? I'm going to say I feel like a semi risk taker.
Yeah,
Okay. And you're absolutely right about the golden handcuffs. And what I think about is I'm all into my sayings. You'll soon probably get that.
yeah, God.
But the killer of a great life is a good life.
Hmm.
And many people who have a good life because they're paying a pension and the pension's looking all right at the moment, or I'm an 8B and I'm getting 70 grand a year or
Mhm.
thereabouts. So it's good. It's not too bad, or I'm doing a 9 to 5. So, at least I'm not doing nights and shifts or weekends anymore type of thing. I feel like those things, I thought about all of those things, and they almost held me back from making a decision, because I did think
Mhm.
about, gosh, I've got to give up this stable job. I've got to give up paying into my NHS pension. I've got to give up all of the securities that I felt were in the NHS, which
Mhm.
largely, at the end of the day, are there. So there's no denying that. And I think that's one of the positive things about the NHS. But I'm a semi-risk taker.
Yeah.
And I decided that if I'm going to have a future that is outside of the box and that looks very different to living hand to mouth,
Mhm.
and trying to make a salary stretch between, paying all of your usual things, then trying to have holidays, then trying to
Yeah.
think about investments and all the rest of it, and then to think about my children's future and their legacy. It's not going to happen for me here in this particular role. It's just not going to happen.
Mhm.
And so I had to think about, well, what is the long term opportunity? And sometimes I think we need to make short term sacrifice for long term gain. And
Yeah.
so, of course, my kids' happiness was the first thing that was important for me. But I knew that going into this other opportunity to work privately, that my money would be the same, if not more.
Mhm.
So I wasn't putting myself, there are some practical things to it. So I wasn't putting
Yeah.
myself in a position of lack, because
Mhm.
of course that wouldn't have made sense. But I made sure that I'd done my numbers, and as people say, the maths was mathsy.
I think the math was, yeah, good,
The
good.
maths made sense. And
Yeah.
so, as I say, people will look for opportunities and may want to move on and do different things. But obviously, you have to use, I think, a level of wisdom when you have
Mhm.
responsibilities. And so, different people can take risks on different levels. But for me, it was a risk to give up my job. But I felt like I made it such a brilliant decision. And
Mhm.
as I say, I think looking at the longer term picture is what helped me to make the decision now.
Great. And
So
I'm so
I
pleased that
will
you
just
said, yeah, go on, go
yeah,
on.
sorry, I will just say as well that I've had a similar situation like this in the past. And
Mhm.
this was before I had children. And I remember at the time I was a band six nurse, and I had a job, and I walked into the job, and I literally was there for a couple of days, and I absolutely hated it.
Mhm.
And I thought to myself, what on earth have I done? I got into that job because it was a community role, and I was previously in a community role. So it was a sideways move, simply because I
Yeah.
wanted a job near to home. I just thought, I'd recently moved, and I thought, you know what? I just need a job that's 10 minutes up the road.
Yeah.
So that's why I went for that job. And I got it, and I absolutely hated it. And I was only there for 2 days. I really didn't settle into the place.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, I've made such a huge mistake. I've left a team that I absolutely loved. And I remember going outside, calling my mum and saying, you know, I've made a mistake here. I don't know what I'm going to do. There's so many people that are unhappy here. They want to leave. They don't want to stay. There's
Yeah.
all sorts going on. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And I remember my mum saying, make a decision.
Mhm.
This is 2 days in. She's like, make a decision. And I thought, make a decision. Okay, well, I don't know what the decision is to be made. And she said, if it's not for you, you don't need to go back. If
Yeah.
it's not for you, you don't need to go back. You can resign with immediate effect. You don't need to be stuck in one place. You can go and get another job out there, look at what your options are. And so it took me a week to make the decision, but
Mhm.
a week in, I did not return to that place. I handed in my notice with it. I resigned with immediate effect, and I was jobless. I actually did not have a job to go to. Right. And so,
Yeah.
as I say, at that time, I didn't have any children. So
Yeah.
I felt like I could be a bit more, what's the word? Risky. I could
It's,
take a few
yeah.
more risks at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what happened is, for a few months, I actually did a bit of business with a family member of mine. And it was
Okay.
still related to health. So it was good. It was nice. And it got me out, and it got me doing things. And I was able to earn a little bit of money in between. And then I actually went into doing agency work. So I
Mhm.
was a locum nurse for about 3 years. And then I went back into permanent NHS work after that. But I remember people saying to me, locum doing agency is not good. It's not good for you. You won't be able to do this, and you won't be able to get a house. You won't be able to have children. Your future won't be stable. You're not going to be able to save your pension. All of these things people were throwing at me.
Mm.
And in fact, they were even saying it before I had left the NHS job, because I checked in with a couple of other like senior NHS people that I knew. And of
Yeah.
course, they were trying to tell me, try and stick it out. You never know.
Yeah.
You got to think about your pension and all these things. And my mum, who's never worked in the NHS, she's not a
Hmm.
nurse, and was telling me something completely different. And I'm so glad that she did. And I still made the leap. And
Hmm.
people often have a lot of fears around, taking the leap and making the decision. And I was still able to live a great life. I was still able to save. I was still able to look at investments. I was able to have a child whilst
Mm.
a locum nurse. I was able to save up, and I was able to stay off work for almost a year. And those are things that I thought I would never be able to do, because people said you won't be able to do those things if you do private work, if you do agency. So I think, so I'm just using that example to say that I've
Mm.
been in a similar position before, where I came to a
Yeah.
crossroads and I needed to make a decision. And my position now doesn't mean that I would never go back into the NHS. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
I might
You
become a millionaire next year. So if that's the
you
case,
heard it
who
here
knows?
first.
You heard it here
Exactly.
first. So, but it's not to say I'd never go back into the NHS. I think I'm
No.
a very open person in that way, and I think I'm all about opportunity. So you never
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. But also, I'm so glad everybody's going to have an opinion, and it's always the people that haven't done the risky stuff.
Yes, always, always.
So it's like you say, I'm really like, it's that whole bit where you're doing your due diligence, you're planning, you're checking, you're doing the numbers, because if you're doing the numbers and making sure they add up for you, your family, your life. But also, as you said, you've had a similar situation as well. So you're learning from
Yes,
your past, and what they say,
yes,
success leaves clues, isn't it? You know,
absolutely, it
other
does. Yes,
people
yes,
have done it. We need to learn from that. But the other bit, I think, as well, you've got youth on your side. You know, like
yes,
even we you can always go back. The NHS is going to be
yes,
here for
yes,
don't they'll always need staff.
yeah.
I listen to this thing called Squiggly Careers, which is a really
Oh,
good
yes.
podcast, which
Mhm.
essentially says we all seem to think of our careers being a ladder, or you always have to go up. But what I really
Yeah.
like, what which you said as well, and I've sort of done some of it, is you've made sideways move.
Yes,
You've
yes,
made totally different moves, but you've always
yes.
based it on what's important for Nicole, you know?
Definitely, that's what it comes to. Absolutely. And I think, like you said, we just get so used to the the way of life and the way of living, the lifestyle of a nurse, and there are lots of people. I've got some fantastic friends and colleagues who are still band fives, and they are very used to the life of a nurse on the
Yeah.
ward. It's very difficult for them to even picture a life of doing a 9 to 5, because they've done nights for 10 years. So I think we get so ingrained, but I think it goes really down to mindset and self-belief. And a
Yeah.
lot of times I feel that people don't necessarily move forward because they don't really truly believe that they either deserve better, or that they can actually aim higher, that they can ever be on a salary of 70, 80, 100 grand a year. They don't
Hmm.
really believe that they can achieve those things. And so I think I definitely went through that a lot in my career, where I didn't feel that I could do certain roles. And whilst I thought about my kids and wanting to earn more money for their sake, I had lots of times where I had imposter syndrome, and I thought,
Yeah.
I can't be a senior manager. There was a point I was so petrified, and you will know from hearing me speak about this before,
Yeah.
Sabrina. I was petrified of public speaking. If you'd have told me, come on a podcast and do a live
Yeah.
record, I would say I can't do it. I don't know how I used to do handovers on the wards, or go to like patient
Yeah.
tribunals and sit in those big meetings, because I was always so afraid, so nervous. I delayed being a manager for a long time. I knew I could do it, but I
Hmm.
didn't have the self-belief, because I didn't want to do public speaking. I didn't want somebody to say, right, you've got to do the next presentation about this, and that.
Yeah.
So I actively avoided those things. And as I say, until I started to think, actually, I've got to take myself out of this. I've got to think about other people's futures, and
Hmm.
how they're going to benefit if I actually take this step and stop thinking about myself and all the reasons why I can't and I shouldn't and I won't. And one of the things that I will just drop in here is that I
Mhm.
have had a brilliant journey with Toastmasters, which is
Yeah.
an organisation that supports people around speaking. I'm actually the treasurer for my local
Oh,
Toastmasters,
well,
and yes, and it has been honestly a fantastic journey of self-development, learning how to speak, learning how to present,
mhm,
giving and receiving feedback from other people who are also on the speaking journey. I've managed to take part in lots of different competitions at sort of local level and what they call district level. So with other clubs, competing with other
yeah.
clubs. Um, and honestly, I've done things that I thought I'd never do. And I must say that a large part of that is down to my Toastmasters journey.
And I'm glad you said that because, again, a podcast I was speaking on this morning, imposter syndrome comes up all the time, and I'm going to say it now, even in my role, I still feel like an imposter. So I don't think it
Yeah.
ever goes away wherever you are in the hierarchy. But it's that bit that you say, it's coming back to that self-belief and why you're around the table and what you have to
Yes.
offer, one, but also tapping into networks and
Yes.
using tips and tricks and things. So Toastmasters sounds
Mhm.
great because I was
Yeah.
saying to person I've been fortunate for a number of courses I've been to. Part of it has been RADA, which is Royal Academy for
Yes.
Drama and Art, because the
Yes.
reality is when you become a leader, you step into roles, a lot of it is all an act. You have to,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and again, you have to prepare for it, and
Yes.
I think, and I heard this brilliant line that it just sits with me, and it was said by Hannah Awanuga, and I hope I say her name properly. She used to work in Barclays, and she's now got her own executive coaching. But she
Mhm.
said something on the Bread and Butter podcast. She said, "You need to be you, but with skill." And that just sits
Yes.
with me
Love
because I
that.
just sort of think we can be ourselves, but we need to make sure we've got the backing that, how do
Yes.
you bring that into a room? And sometimes it is working with your networks, but sometimes you need
Yes.
extra help. So
Yes.
I'm really
Absolutely.
glad you did Toastmasters because I remember having
Yes.
conversations with you where
Yes. You
you
know,
were
where I never wanted to
petrified.
speak.
I
Yeah.
know.
I mean, I would avoid it like the plague.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I was one of those people that needed help. I really needed help.
And look at you now. So you see it
Look at
work.
me now.
In terms of nurses that want to go into some of and I don't know if you wanted to talk about the particular avenues that you've gone into,
Mhm.
just to give people an idea of what is out there, but also how
Yeah.
people can connect with you as well on those
Mhm.
bits.
Yeah, well, I love an opportunity to talk about
Okay.
business.
Yeah.
So I've done lots of different business in the past to give you a bit of a sort of backstory. And as I said earlier, I started in hair. I used to do
Hmm.
beauty, lashes. I then pivoted into doing online business. So I did Amazon FBA for a while. And I also did some, and I still do now seasonally, some catering with my mum because she runs her own
Hmm.
catering business. And so there are some months, for example, in the summer months where I'm very active with that business,
Yeah.
traveling around and working with them. So I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit and known, from a young age, my mum's always taught me have different options when it comes to
Yeah.
income. And a lot of that has been birthed out of difficulties, that she'd faced in terms of business and, losing business and losing lots of things from investments. And so that's always stuck with me. But recently, so I actually work in travel and marketing now. So I've got my own team. I have just over 30 people now in my team altogether.
Great.
And what helped me to get into this particular business is I was really looking for something that I could do online from home in my
Mhm.
pajamas. It needed to be ticking those three boxes because I was already looking for more time. I didn't want to be doing a business, for example, when I used to do hair and I would be traveling to different people's houses, standing up doing hair for hours and hours.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do anything that was going to take me out of the home. And so when the opportunity came up to earn in travel, I thought this is a no-brainer because I love to travel. I
Yeah.
tend to go away. I mean, this year I think I've traveled 4 times and I haven't quite hit my target. I need to like double that for next year. So, but I'm a person who travels. I've been to Caribbean, US, Asia, so many different places, and it was just like a no-brainer. So
Mhm.
that's what helped me to get into travel. And as I said, the opportunity was to be able to run this flexibly whilst maintaining my nursing registration and alongside the private work that I do. Having something that I could do sort of before I start my private work and in the evenings, at the weekends, and that's really what has led me into working in travel. Really, I mean, who doesn't love a holiday?
Yeah, I know, right? I've had 7 this year. Well, it will be 7. No, but I really love that bit about the 3 things, your 3 red lines essentially.
Yes,
Online, in your pajamas, not leaving the home, because,
yes,
like you say, I do think, and again, a lot of us rely on one job. You've mentioned that you
yeah,
invest, you've got your travel business, and also you have got the private work, because sadly, yeah, we've got youth at the minute, but we are getting older.
yeah.
And I mean, back in the day when I used to do the shifts, there's only so many hours one can work,
This is
you
it.
know?
Absolutely. There's only so many hours before a manager, that used to be me. I used to be that
Yeah,
manager
that,
telling
I'm that
somebody about
person now. I'm that
working time
person.
directive.
Yeah.
Oh, that the policy, that was me. And so I think what I found really helpful personally, and from working with the nurses that are in my team, is they're looking for flexibility at the end of the day. I
Mhm.
think, like you said, a lot of people want to earn the extra money, but they don't necessarily want to do the shifts, or might not be in a position to work extra shifts. So, for example, I've had people that have come to work with me because they've got particular health ailments, which means that they can no longer take on additional shifts. It might be
Yeah.
childcare. Some of them are caring for parents that are older. Older adults. So they're not in a position to leave them to then go and
Yeah.
start picking up extra shifts. There are so many different reasons why people need that flexibility, and so I think an online based business, home based, is what provides that opportunity. I think whenever you have, what I tell people to do is to look for opportunities where your income, the earning potential, is unlimited.
Mhm.
There's no cap on it. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
I know that if I was in an NHS job and I did want to exponentially grow my income, I know I'm going to have to probably go to the top. I'm probably going to have to be a chief exec,
Yeah, be the
Sabrina.
CEO, love, and even
I've got to
then
be a
there's a cap on
CEO,
it.
and even then there's a cap.
Yeah.
I might only be able to make £250,000, but what if I'm a girl with a big dream and I actually want to
Mm.
make 1 million? What will I do then?
Yeah.
So I think it's about looking for opportunities where the income potential is unlimited. I think in any business aspect there's always a marketing side, so we're always talking to people about
Mhm.
opportunities. Whether that's, I mean, I used to recruit lots of nurses into the NHS and share opportunities, and now I feel like, oh, I'm recruiting all these people to do business.
Mm.
And sometimes people say, oh, how do you do that? And I think, well, I used to do it in nursing, but now I'm doing it to show people a different future, an unlimited
Yeah.
income future, a time freedom future. And I feel fantastic about that, especially when I see that people have been able to top up the piggy bank. And sometimes it's very simple. People may just want additional income to pay a bill. It might be to buy gifts for someone or to cover certain periods of the year, Easter,
Mhm.
Christmas, and other sort of things that go on throughout the year. So at the end of the day, it's what it means for the person. Um, but I think, yeah, look for things where it doesn't matter what your background is, your gender, your ethnicity, your age, your
Yeah.
religious belief, your position in society. These types of business, and the business that I do, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter where you come from. You can start today and you can go right to the top. At the end of the day, it's completely down to you. So yeah, I think the other quick thing that I'll say about that is, when you get into business, I also feel that that's such a big ground for personal development, because where I've left my NHS job and I'm now not managing teams, I am now supporting in a leadership role to people in my team in business,
Yeah.
and I'm still able to use some of those skills. I mean, I'm not their manager as such, but I'm still able to use leadership skills. I have opportunities. I had an opportunity probably a few months back now, to
Mhm.
speak on stage in front of 100 people. And again, I never thought, in fact, I would sort of say, no, I don't think I can do that. It's probably
Yeah.
too many people, but you know what? I did it. I did it. And so the opportunities still to work on things like personal development, mindset, speaking, leadership,
Mhm.
teamwork, it's all there in business, and I think that these are fantastic opportunities for nurses to have.
No, definitely. And I'm really glad you've said that, because there's something around, we're at a critical, there's always pivotal times in history, isn't it? There's potentially the dot-com boom, but now we've got where people can do online things online, use
Yeah.
AI or use systems, because I suppose with your business it's got systems and processes that's already set
Yeah.
up. So people,
Yes.
you don't have to think about it. There might be things you have to do,
Yeah.
but it's sort of there. You've got mentoring, etc. But
Yes.
also it gives you
Yes.
an extra basket
Yes.
to,
Absolutely.
when one drops. And again, the whole bit around, yeah, just about the person saying about working time directives, but if you're working all the hours that God gives, at some point your
Yeah.
body's going to give out, because
Yes.
the body keeps the score, and you can't
Yes.
work.
Yes.
There's only 24 hours in any
Yeah.
one day.
Yeah.
And also the other bit I think is, if you don't wrap your money into something such as a business where you can get tax incentives,
Yes.
you then hit a point where you go over the 20% income tax, which
Yes.
now I hear it's going to
Yes.
be 45K. So
Yes.
so you end up working for the tax man who's taking your money even before
Yeah.
you've done
Exactly.
anything.
This is the thing, and it's sort of like, this is why it's really interesting, because there are people who, you could be on. I remember I have a family member who's in business, and she used to say to me, "Well, some people are earning 100 grand, but they're not in a regular. So let's say they're in a corporate job or in a
Yeah,
public sector job, but they're actually getting paid about 40 grand."
of
And then
course.
you've got people in business who are actually making 100 grand, and they're keeping majority of that because of, as
Exactly.
you said, the tax planning, and of course, a financial, relevant financial advice that they may be getting from an accountant,
Hmm.
etc. And so there are different efficiencies that are out there. People can obviously go and read up on those things, but there are lots of ways to be tax efficient. And this is some of the education you see that you get when you're in business that you don't get necessarily in nursing, because nobody's going to tell you, what can you actually do when you're an employee. Your tax at
Yeah.
source and your PAYE, what can you really do? Um, and so, yeah, I think one of the things that people can do is get themselves into business. And I think I was reflecting earlier, in conversation with my mum, and I was thinking, gosh, how do people really, survive, as you say, on the one salary, on the surplus
Hmm.
that's left, which for many people, even on a brilliant salary, is really not
There's
much.
not.
If
Yeah.
you own your own property and there's any issue with the roof or plumbing or
Tax,
guttering,
caps lock,
tax,
tax.
you've got to always have money set
Yeah.
aside, because suddenly it's your problem. If you're renting, it's slightly different. But if you own a property, if you have
Yeah.
children, or you want to start a family, you look at those. I remember one year I looked at the nursery fees, that, I mean, it was almost 30,000 in a year. And I thought, well, I never knew it was that much money. When you look at it all together, it's
Yeah.
astonishing. So it's when you look at these things and you think, well, actually, if I'm earning this much and then I've got to pay rent or mortgage, if you've got any debts, you've got to be paying those, any credit cards and
Hmm.
loans, and then if you've got a car, if you're paying for that, or travel, if you travel on trains all the time, and you don't live where you work or nearby,
Yeah.
any emergencies, then to have a holiday, and then if you want to look good, you want to get your hair done or nails or, new clothes,
Yeah.
it's
Life
it's a
is,
lot.
it is. I read this book called Your Money or Your Life. If people haven't read it, do read
Yes, I've
it,
heard of that book.
because you talk about the 100K, because there's an exercise that goes through those bits that you talk about. So yes, you're earning 100K, but out of that money, you've got to pay for looking the part, for
Absolutely,
going
yes.
into the
People
job.
don't
So when
talk about
you
that enough.
No, and then so when you work out what your true hourly rate is, it isn't the £22 an hour that you
Mm.
think you're making, because by the time you take out your travel, your food, your clothing, the other bits that you said, it might be more closer to £4 or 3K. So
Yes,
but
yes.
again, all this is about being educated. We're not so think for people listening, not knocking having permanent jobs at all,
Mhm.
it's just thinking when you have it, what else have you got there? Or even
Yes.
if you're in a permanent job, how are you, some of the surplus you may or may not have, how are you using it to make sure if you've got a rainy day, or have you got an
Yes.
emergency fund of maybe a grand?
Yes.
Because from people like
Mhm.
me, when my mom's at home, if, and I
Yeah.
say at home, St. Vincent, by the way, Nicole
Yes.
and I are both heritage from St. Vincent, which is
Vincy to the
great.
bone.
Yeah. But you know, if my mom was ill tomorrow, I know I could get money to go and see her. Some people
Yeah.
can't do that, you know.
Yes,
So some people are
absolutely.
just one emergency away from
Yeah.
getting into debt. So there's something
Yes.
about, if it's not business, just getting some sort of financial
Yeah.
knowledge about how you
Yes.
can make your money work better for you.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
always say, because Nicole, you said you're in your 30s, so I hope you've got a lifetime ISA, because
Yes.
and investing in stocks and shares and not
Yes.
cash, because again, people, you know, when inflation's biting your money, the £200 this year isn't £200 next year, but stocks
Exactly.
and shares, when you choose wisely, can help with that.
Hmm. Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And I think, yeah, if I had to go back to my younger self as a
Good.
nurse, I would really be saying get work on the speaking, because
Hmm.
at the end of the day that will propel you forward, whether that's in your career, whether it's also alongside business and just personally. And I'd also get a better financial education, to be quite honest, because I do think there's so many people that are people in nursing who are really living life on the edge. They're really living hand to mouth. They're struggling to get by. Some of them are on the breadline. They are really struggling. And I just think that the financial education is not necessarily always there.
Yeah.
So I think that the things that you've mentioned, so different types of accounts, stocks and shares, what can nurses do to grow their money?
Yeah.
This is such an important, I mean, this is a topic on its own.
I
Financial
know.
literacy for nurses
It is.
is like a topic on its own.
It
And I wonder whether, or how different it would be having that conversation with medical colleagues, because I feel it would be quite different.
Well,
It
there
may
is.
be a different experience, but who knows?
Well, I think it might be different, but you would be surprised to know. I suspect they're in similar situation to nurses. And when I say that in terms of, I guess, financial education, there is a podcast I listen to on and off where it's medics talking about exactly that. So again,
Yes.
because there was, colleagues would remember, because we spoke about the pension, which has changed now, but not too long ago, a number of doctors were leaving the NHS because they had paid in the maximum, which then meant they were getting massive tax bills
Mm, yeah.
that they then had to fund. And yes, doctors make it quote unquote good pay, but like we said, if you do
Yeah.
the math of travel and paying to dress up in their suits, and because
Absolutely.
they're
Yes.
always
Yes.
well turned out, but when you do the math, you sort of go, actually, nobody's got that amount of money that the taxman's asking for.
That is so true.
to,
And you know what? You're so right, because actually the number of times I've come across in even in the business that I do now, doctors,
Mhm.
consultants, GPs who are also in the same business, is I've found it fascinating, because I think, like a lot of people, I also have probably had that mindset that, doctors, well, if they're a senior doctor or consultants, they're really well paid. Surely they're not looking for other opportunities to earn. But lo and behold, they are looking for other opportunities. You
They
know,
are.
so you are right, and I have personally had doctors asking me about business opportunities. So you are absolutely right. That is true.
Great. Well, Nicole, you already said what you would tell your younger person, but which I absolutely like. Like now, I've only just started sort of delving into the financial stuff and business, which hence me trying sorting out my Nurse Launchpad membership thing.
Yes.
Because again, I think we need a space not only to think about careers, but discuss the other bits. Because for me,
Yes.
there's no point going up the ladder and your money you can't see,
Yeah.
or the hard work that you're
Hmm.
working going to
Yes.
nothing, and that legacy piece that you spoke about. But if people wanted to get in contact with you, how could they do that?
So you can find me on Instagram or Facebook at It's Nicole Calendar. I will be there. I'm usually on stories every day, but I've put my handle in my name as well. So see you there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I hope you take some of the things that Nicole said and act on it and just be bold and brave with it. So thank you very much.